Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back to another episode of Sangat Talks, where we try to understand the value of Sikhi, remove misconceptions from Sikhi, and try to become a better Sikh. Now, today I'm joined by Navpreet Singh. So thank you very much, Navpreet Singh, for coming onto the podcast. And if you'd like to just give a quick introduction about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So my name is Navpreet Singh. I'm also known as Nav the Poet. I'm a spoken word artist, a content creator, and I talk a lot about Sikhi and educate people about the Sikh faith and practices on TikTok, Instagram, and other platforms. And I'm really excited to chat with you today, man.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm really excited too. We spoke a little bit the other day, and it was really interesting just to, it was nice to have another conversation about Sikhi. I feel like it's something that we're missing out a lot. But tell me a little bit more about your background. So where did the journey of Sikhi actually start with you?
Right. So, I mean, I was born into a Sikh family. I was raised, going to Gurdwara every week. I was taught the principles and shared, my family and community shared sakhis and all the, not all, but a lot of information of, the basics, ideals about the faith. But it wasn't until I was in college where I really started practicing the faith myself. I started writing poetry in college after I was dealing with a lot of emotional and internal turmoil and struggles. And one day I just started writing poetry in class. I was terribly bored in a chemistry class or something. It was such a relief. And I think I even told you this when we were talking last time. I write very quickly, like poems will be done in 5 to 10 minutes. And I don't know why. I don't have a technique or something that, makes me a better writer than someone. It's just, it flows out of me. And the way I view it is that it's not really me speaking, it's something speaking through me, some energy, some force. And after I started performing a little later that year, in 2011, I really felt this passion and this love for poetry and my voice and everything like that. And that is what really led me to start looking into Sikhi again on my own, because I felt I was still missing something. And I wanted to understand what that was or what it might be. And just having that education from a youth of Sikhi and everything, I gravitated towards it naturally. And having experienced all I have being a Sikh in the US, I ended up writing a lot about that. So I wrote about the discrimination I faced, the strength of our shaheeds and the beauty of our faith and of our culture. And I think all of that together really drew me back into Sikhi. And I started really understanding that for me, Sikhi is about a relationship with me and Maharaj, and just that one-to-one relationship, and not so much what everyone else is doing and telling me, I need to do to be a good Sikh. And that was the beginning. And I've just continued to pursue that journey to today.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very nice as well to see. I mean, I think I've had a quite similar background to you. Grew up in a Sikh family, understood like the basics and the values and principles from a very young age, but kind of drifted away from it as you get to the kind of, your teenage years. You're like, you want to explore different things. But then me too, I very much felt like, it is, something's just missing, something doesn't feel right. And I was watching everyone else deal with how they thought, all right, if something's missing in my life, people fill it with like lots of other things, like drugs, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. But I was like, it is, I know that that's not the answer. Like I've seen people go to that, and it's definitely not the path I want to go down. So yeah, I also came back to Sikhi, and really that's when I started to appreciate the value that Sikhi holds. So it's nice. And the last thing that you mentioned about how it really is a one-to-one connection with you and Vaheguru, and even if you just relate it back to that ik, like ik and God, like if there is only Vaheguru, no one else really ever gets involved in that sense. Like it is just you. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting to see. One thing that I wanted to touch on as well is, obviously you're a content creator, you're on TikTok.
Yes.
How did you get onto TikTok?
So it's all started with my poetry. So not only do I just write and perform for fun, I'm pursuing it as a career, and I've been booked for gigs, and I've traveled across the United States performing. I've been to Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee. I've been to a bunch of places across the country, and I've gotten paid to perform. So this is a career I'm pursuing. It's not simply a hobby or just this art I'm doing on the side. And so I thought TikTok, in 2019, I heard about TikTok and thought it might be, after a lot of resistance, actually, a couple of months, I'm like, this sounds so pointless, whatever, it's another social media. I don't really like social media, but I kept hearing about it, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'll just film myself performing, I'll post it, I won't even think about it much. And so I started doing that for a couple of months, and I garnered a small following, couple thousand followers. And then I started to understand how the For You page works. And for anybody that doesn't, the For You page on TikTok is like a discover or an explore page, but it can give you content from any creator, because the algorithm attempts to find out what you like. So it serves you all different types of content. So I started to realize some of my videos would get, maybe 10,000 views or something, rarely, but it was a couple here or there. And so I was like, that's a lot of people seeing my content, and that's a lot of people that are seeing this image, this face, and this, the star, the beard and everything. And I started to realize that those people might have questions about what all of this means, what the faith is about and everything, because Sikh is so misunderstood, specifically in the West. And so I decided to start making some videos, and I really thought I'd just make a couple of videos, talk about the basics, what our principles are, what, the articles of faith mean, and that'd be good. We're all good to go, But no, my first video, I talked about, how it started, and then the second video, I talked about the meaning and significance of case and the start. And that video, within 2 days, I think it was, hit 60K views. And at the end of every video, I would say, hey, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And so I opened up this dialogue for people to learn about the faith and not be uncomfortable asking questions, because that's usually the hurdle at least the one that I encounter, is people are saying, yeah, I want to know more, but I don't know what's appropriate to ask, or if you're comfortable talking about it. So by letting people know that I'm willing to answer questions, it really opened up the ability to have conversations about the faith and let people really be comfortable approaching me and speaking about, or taking interest in learning about the faith. So that, and then it took off, honestly.
Yeah, it's crazy, because like I think that's a barrier that a lot of people I don't know if it stems from our culture, or if it stems from lack of leadership, or what it is, the actual root of the problem. But a lot of people really struggle to ask questions to each other. And that's what I found as well with TikTok. People like asking like some of the most like simple questions that I thought, everyone knows this stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't realize how blessed I was to have the education that I do. Like, then people would ask questions. And it was nice to see that finally people are actually discussing these things, people that interested in learning about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's crazy how many people have questions, but how many people keep it to themselves. They're like, I'm not going to ask it might seem stupid, I don't want to mess this up, I don't want this person to think I'm dumb or whatever. And because of that, there's so many unanswered questions, and that's why I think there's such a big demand for videos like the ones that you make, because everyone's asking internally, but then when they see someone addressing it, like even you mentioned in America, that there's a lot, just in Western countries in general, there's a lot of prejudice or misunderstanding when it comes to Sikhi, what it is, the values and things like that. So people who may be not even interested will then just like see your content and be like, oh wow, I'm learning about this guy, I'm learning about what he does and stuff like that. And I think the fact that you do poetry as well it's a really nice thing for people to see. It's a really good representation, because poetry is very much seen as this kind of emotional, like meaningful, deep, peaceful kind of thing that people do. And for a Sikh to be represented in that, it already just starts to show the values that Sikh people have. Like our gurus were poets, and now it's like we've got, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's funny because, on a side note, like I get people from the community because of a culture that is, focused so much on success, financial success. When I tell people I'm a poet, older generations, they like question it. And I'm like, you're the same person who practices Sikhi, right? Like, how could you hate on me for poetry when like our good with the people you literally look up to and our words you are reciting are poetry? And it's a weird thing, just a total side note. But yeah, I mean, it's why I connected with poetry too, and like why it's so, you know, easy for me to connect with Bonnie as well, because it's the same thing. Like I'm just like, yeah, it's just, I mean, I think their poetry is better than mine, but like it's a, you know, it's the same concept. And I love that we come from a lineage of poets. Like I get to say that. And I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not something that I thought about too much until like I actually started realizing, oh yeah, poetry, like it's so big in Barney. Like it is literally how all of Barney is written. So no, it is something that I think you're probably the only Sikh poet that I know. So
I cross off a lot of people's firsts. It's really funny. I'm like the first Sikh or only Sikh people know. Same with poet. Like I've met people, other not even Sikhs, but just South Asians. And when I tell them I'm a poet, and they're like our age, they are so like they're amazed and so proud in a way, because they know they've gone through a similar struggle of being told you have to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or whatever. And they're just like, it's amazing that they say to me, it's amazing that you are doing this and doing something different than what's expected of you. And I mean, it's not something I intended to be, but it's cool to kind of be somewhat of a, you know, I don't like to use this word for myself, but like inspiration, I guess, or just at least, you know, give people a sense of feeling that they don't have to relegate themselves to a career they don't want to do.
yeah, like you, in a big sense, you are breaking a lot of cultural norms, like become a doctor, dentist, or the engineer, or whatever it is. So no, it is good. It is good. I think there's a lot of topics that we've already covered, and I'm thinking which one do I want to go into further.
Yeah.
But cultural norms is definitely a big one that we can discuss.
Dude, I was a mechanical engineering major before I switched to film and television. So imagine,
really,
yeah, yeah. So imagine my community's shock and dismay.
wow, okay.
And me being like, yeah, I'm gonna be an engineer. Then a couple months later, I'm actually going into film and
So,
television
wow, okay.
and poetry and
That's a
pursuing
big jump,
poetry.
you
Like
know.
it's a big jump, it's a big change of mentality. But I mean, again, it's not something I intended to do for the sake of breaking barriers or cultural norms. But now that I've done it, I'm happy to say that I am making those strides and opening doors for other people to at least consider different avenues and different, you know, paths in life.
Hmm. No, it's good. I mean, I'm an engineer as well. I literally study mechanical engineering. So now I know, at least if I want to change, I can be like, yeah, but look at Navpreet. No, but it's really good to see. It's really good to see. And in terms of cultural norms, one of my biggest, like, I could say pet peeves or whatever, but like one of the things that frustrate me the most is when culture interferes with Sikhi. So it's very difficult, but culture and Sikhi are two very, very different things. And unfortunately, because a lot of people see them as overlapping, people who don't have much knowledge on Sikhi tend to put culture into their Sikhi.
Mm-hmm.
What experiences have you had with culture, like maybe Indian culture, or just like the way that people like culture, even in the West, like being in America? How has culture impacted the way that you perceive Sikhi?
Or the way that I've perceived it.
Yeah, you personally.
Oh, interesting. I thought you were going to ask how people have imposed it on me. That's a totally different question.
Okay, that's my next question. I'll
Oh,
wait.
okay. It's definitely made me. It's honestly strengthened my Sikhi though, because, you know, so when I was growing up, the reason I distanced myself from Sikhi was because of judgment I faced from my own community, right? Because I think I told you this story as well. I would be, maybe I didn't, I told a lot of people, but like I'd be doing seva in Langar, right? I'm like giving out dal and everything. And someone would literally, like an uncle would come up to me like, it's so great that you do seva, but like you should really wear the star, because I was wearing a patka. And I'm like, Uncle G, like I'm first of all, I'm in the middle of seva. What are you doing? You know? Second of all, like, why is that? I know it's important. Obviously, like I wear the star. I understand the significance, but how is that more important to you than the actions? If I'm doing seva with the love that Guruji has told us to do seva with, if I'm helping others, why is that the part you're harping on right now, right? And so it was just a lot of those little like nitpicks that people would put on you, and these judgments of, because I didn't do Sikhi at their speed, right? Because that's what it is. It's not like I didn't plan to wear the star. It's just I wasn't comfortable wearing it yet. And but it wasn't in line with their speed, their way, and everything. And I didn't like it. And I was like, if this is what Sikhi is, why would I want to be a part of this community? And then through my journey, I realized like that's not what Sikhi is, right? That's just people, and people taking Sikhi and applying it however they choose. But Sikhi is so full of love and no judgment, and it's the exact opposite of the things I experienced. And so it definitely played a role in first me misunderstanding it, but then actually getting a better understanding and saying like, oh, that person isn't, living or embodying Sikh principles or the teachings of our guru. They, so that's not what I should be worrying about, right? Because just because someone does something wrong doesn't mean the principles have now changed, right? The principles have been there and stayed the same since our guru set them. So why am I applying someone else's actions on the words of my guru is how I started to look at it, right? And that was the important part in my journey that I really had to come to terms with and understand before I could really embody and try to practice Sikhi.
Definitely. So with that, like, I'm sure from both of our point of view, Sikhi is genuinely perfect in terms of the way that the Guru set it out, what they told us to do, and how they want us to live our lives. Those things are perfect. That's why so many people follow Sikhi. Whereas people's misinterpretation of Sikhi, people's cultural takes on Sikhi, and the way that people react to certain things in Sikhi are not perfect. And those are what drive us away from it a lot of the time. So it's very difficult to separate the two, especially if you don't know your history, if you haven't been educated. Like a lot of people, I mean, you talked about this before in the last call that we had, that especially if you have immigrant parents, a lot of the time they're very busy. They've got a lot of things to do, and they don't necessarily teach you in depth the way that you would like them to, because they just don't have time. And it's not like a bad thing or they have bad intentions or whatever, but like they're trying to literally make a living. They're trying to like help you to like create a future and all these kind of things. So it's completely understandable from their point of view. But the result of that does also say that, all right, now we're having a lot of kids that are uneducated in Sikhi, and they see Sikhs, they see culture, they mix the two together. And it's a very bad mix because they don't align, they don't work together. So people think that Sikhi, Sikhi doesn't work. People look at it and they think, these Sikhs, these aren't the kind of people that I want to be like. But that's because of the cultural aspects, like the judgment that you mentioned. It's the culture of it. Mm-hmm. Now, my other question was going to be, how have you think culture has impacted other people within Sikhi?
Sure.
So yeah, I'll.
So, I mean, I just think that it goes back to this. One of the biggest things I feel is as much as beautiful as it is that like India and South Asia is a very communal based society, because that means you always have people around to support you. That also, in my view, leads to people being nosy and wanting to, put their voice on everything about your life, right? And it's like, oh, you don't dress the right way, you don't talk the right way, you don't have the right career, the right partner, whatever it is. Like there's always commentary on your life because we're always so involved with each other. And I think that's one of the, downsides of that heavy community-based society, is just that people are always in each other's business. And it's like, even once I started wearing a dastar, people would tell me I wasn't wearing the right type of dastar. I'm like, bro, I don't, that made me realize like, okay, what people say, especially about like my look, some people like, you should really tie up your dadi, or like you should use gel and stuff. I was like, why? It's not your dadi. Why do you care so much, bro? Like,
yeah,
And there was no reason. There was no like, oh, it makes us look bad, even though that's not a good reason. But like, it was just what they think, and that's fine. But imposing that idea on me, like, it wasn't like a, hey, have you ever thought about this? It was just like, you should really do this. I was like, why would I really do that? I have no desire to. And it's so strange. And it's just this idea of everybody thinks they know what's best for you. And maybe it even comes from good intentions, but at the end of the day, like, I have to live my life. You're not existing in this body. So your view on me is limited. Like I'll give it some consideration depending on what I think about it, but there's a limit to how much of it I care about.
Yeah, no, completely the same. Like the thing is, even when I was younger, people would say like, have you taken Amrit yet? I'm like, no. They're like, well, why not? And like, it's not like they're curious to know why. They genuinely couldn't care less of the reason.
Yes.
All they want to do is make me feel bad for not like being blessed with Amrit. And like, it's such a bad part of the community. Nobody wants that feeling. And just to have that pressure on you, like you go to the Gurdwara and people are going to say this or do that or like look like that. And like, I mean, as guys, I'm going to be honest, I think we've got it easy compared to how a lot of the women have got it.
For sure.
Like both of them are bad. Like, it's not good for anyone.
Right.
But I mean, it's a very judgmental community, but I really want people to understand that that is cultural practices. Nowhere in Sikhi does it say that people should be doing that. Nowhere in Sikhi does it say that you should go out and like treat people like this. Sikhis, there's so much focus on humility and understanding your own wrongdoings and understanding how you can improve. And it's not saying go out and like, never in Sikhi does it say go out and like convert these people or make them do this. Like if it did, then fair enough, I'd understand why people saying, oh, you need to take on that, you need to start wearing this kind of bag, you need to do this with your case. Like then it would be like, okay, well, I see there's that like pressure. No one's telling you to do that. Everything within Sikhi, like the first 5 Singhs that there ever were, those 5 Singhs were asked and they volunteered. So if you're not volunteering, like
I was waiting for you to finish so I could bring that up. That's what I was gonna say. I was like, Guru Gobind Singh Ji gave everyone a choice. He didn't say, hey, everyone come be blessed with Amrit. And he didn't tell anybody, he didn't point to someone and say, you, come give your head. He said, who will be willing to do it? Because everybody has their own journey, their own path, their own, it has to come from inside that desire. That's all. He only wanted people who had the desire to give their head, not someone who was forced, right? So I'm so glad you brought that up because that's exactly what I was thinking.
We're literally on the same wavelength. But yeah, it's crazy. It's not good. It's not good for Sikhi. It's not good for like, or even our mental health when it comes to that point. Like it's very, very negative, toxic environment to be in. But I mean, I guess it is quite difficult to even just like step out of that.
Yeah.
But sorry, go on.
I was saying, I've had friends who've cut their hair and then they decide to stop going to Gurdwara because they know they're going to be criticized and judged, right? Like, again, I understand the significance of case, but if someone decides to take that action, your move should be to encourage them to maybe explore it more, not to push, like judge them and make, belittle them for that action, because they still could find their way back. It's not like you can't continue growing your hair again. But some of my friends are just like, I'm not going because I know I'm gonna have to hear from people. They're gonna ask me questions and judge me and look at me differently. And I understand that because I've seen it, like I've witnessed it happen. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, okay, it's not right or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to even say it's not right, but like, yes, it's not what we're supposed to do, but that doesn't mean it's a definitive decision. Like they can always choose to, grow their case again, so why, like, there's Sakhis where like, like Guruji would talk with like people who are very, greedy or selfish or whatever. And then after hearing from the Guru, they change their ways. Like those Sakhis are there for people to learn that it's one, never too late. You can always change your path. And two, that he did it out of like love and out of, compassion.
Yeah, literally, never too old is a huge one. Like if you start pushing people away, they'll never come back. They'll never come back. If someone does something bad and you still encourage them, like it's not obviously what you might have wanted for them. And See, this is the thing as well. A lot of people, like if a family member cuts their hair or does something or starts drinking, then they all push them away because they're like, it makes us look bad.
Yeah.
And they're so concerned with their own image that they're ready to push that person away and be like, oh, no, I love Sikhi. I would never associate myself with that person.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible mindset. It's a terrible mindset. Guru Nanak Dev Ji didn't travel all over the world just to be like, oh, I don't associate with that person. Oh, I don't want that person here. Everyone sits on the same level. Everyone has langar together. Like, you've got to understand that even if you are the greatest Sikh that there's ever been, which are the gurus, right? They sat with everyone else. They treat everyone else with love. Like, they were forgiven to everyone else. That's the mindset that we need to think about things as well. We can't just look at other people and be like, they cut their hair, they do this, they do that. They're not a good Sikh. Like, you don't know their own experiences, like you said. So it's go for it.
I was gonna say, if we went by that logic of if you cut your hair, if you drink, if you do literally anything against Sikh, I doubt there's like even 1% of people that could be called Sikh, right? Yeah. We all do stuff that we're not supposed to, that isn't in line or accordance with Sikh principles, with our Guru's teachings. So like, if we just struck everyone out that did even one of those things wrong, the Gurdwaras would be empty. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, instead of pushing people away, you should welcome them back in to try to help them understand, right? And at the end of the day, if they choose not to, if that's their path, right? You can't force anybody, right? At the end of the day, Guru Gobind Singh Ji wasn't going to pull anybody on stage on his own. You know, he wasn't going to make anybody come up and, you know, give their head. So why should we force anybody to volunteer if that's not the life they want to choose? That's not the life they choose, right? You know, whether we like it or not.
No, completely. But yeah, I mean, this conversation could go on for a long time, but there is definitely other topics I want to talk about. For sure. One of the things is media. So this also, I guess, plays a big part in terms of culture. But you're a film and media student, you said, yeah? Mm-hmm. So you know your way around the movie and how it plays itself out. Yeah. Now, Sikh representation in media is a huge thing for me, and it makes me sad a lot of the time. And it's one of the big reasons why a lot of the time I'll just refuse to watch Indian films. I don't watch any Bollywood films. I'm like, mate, yeah. Om Shanti Om, like 3 Idiots, I've seen none of it, all right? Like, I just don't even bother, because I know, yeah, like, a lot of the time it's just so infected with culture that it's painful. As someone who loves Sikhi, it's painful for me to see someone else's bad portrayal of Sikhi. So what's your experience been with watching people, Sikhs, in media?
It is really similar. I don't watch Bollywood for the same reason. I mean, I've seen a few films and there's some that I love, but they don't usually have Sikhs in them. So I have less to say about those films specifically. But yeah, I've made videos talking about how Sikhs in Bollywood, it's really interesting to see the difference of portrayal in Hollywood versus Bollywood, right? Because at least in India, people know who Sikhs are, right? But they still have perceptions about them, like where either like the goofy, you know, just like side character who's often a drunk, which is of the highest problem to me. Like, I just can't stand it when the character is a drunk. It's so irritating. Or on the other side, we're this like pure Indian patriot. And I'm like, who are you talking about? Like, why do you have Sikhs of these like just like to die for India patriots? It's wild. And yeah, just like, you totally remember so much history with that. And then in Hollywood, we're just barely there. We're more often than not, like 99% of depictions of Sikhs are, one, not played by actual Sikh actors, and two, we're just background characters with one line, maybe. Like, I did a video because someone asked about Sikh representation in Hollywood. I was like, oh, I can reenact pretty much every instance of, you know, Sikhs in Hollywood. And so it was like me pretending to be a cab driver, me pretending to be a Quickie Mart owner. It's just like, that's the one. It's just Quickie Mart owner, cab driver, or then there's this one shot I just walk because they're just background characters. And they're just like,
oh man, it's true. It's actually so true.
It's so wild. And like, yes, as someone who studied media, so there's actually this idea in media studies called cultivation theory, and it's the fact that media influences people's perception of the world. And the higher the consumption by a viewer, the more their perception of the world is dependent or dictated by media, right? And I've literally come across people who have said to me, this one guy stitched one of my videos, and he said, my only experience of people with turbans was Indiana Jones. And like, it's different in the UK because at least like there are a lot more South Asians around, but like in the US, first of all, the US is huge, right? And a lot of the middle of the country, like the Midwestern states, and just like there's not much diversity. So like they don't even have exposure to Sikhs or South Asians even in like their daily life. So all their knowledge is media and usually the news. And in a post 9/11 world, this image on the news was that of terrorists. It was associated with bin Laden, with terrorists. And so that's what Sikhs get, connected to in a lot of media and just like in people's minds. And, with such a tragedy like 9/11, where media coverage was constant for months, right? Like that's all was shown. And then every year there's constant media coverage, like, and this theory, cultivation theory, it says like, it doesn't matter whether it's news or fictional, like that is irrelevant. It's just about how much someone consumes the media. So it's interesting that like you could make a movie about, people in turbans, which plenty do, like post 9/11, all the villains in like war movies are like these movies where like Arabs and they had, turbans and beards speaking in, Arabic, and like, but no one differentiates. It's just people in turbans with beards and brown skin. And so it definitely has painted a really negative picture of this image.
It's really sad to see as well, because like, I mean, even in America, there was that shooting in a Gurdwara, and that it was wrong on so many levels. But I mean, I don't know the details that well. I mean, would you be able to speak on it a little bit if you're more aware of what happened?
Yeah, it was August 5th, 2012 in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, Oak Creek Gurdwara. And yeah, this person who had ties to like white supremacist groups, he came in and started shooting up the Gurdwara. We don't have any full motive because he was killed on scene, but knowing that he's a white supremacist, or connected, tied to them, chances are it was, very racially, religiously what's the word? Motivated, yeah. And he injured, I think, over a dozen people, killed 6 people. The seventh person actually died last year from wounds, from injuries. So that was like 8 years later, 9 years later, 2012, 21. Yeah, so 9 years later, a 7th person died in March, I want to say. What's wild is like the first police officer on scene was shot 15 times. Somehow survived, incredibly. But like these people just don't care, right? They just don't. But like from the news I read, like Sangat was hiding in like pantry closets and other things just to try to keep safe. There were some who did attempt to stop him, and those shaheeds are, just like, it also shows though, like those shaheeds, they took action, even though they could have probably just hid and maybe survived, but they, it's their Gurdwara, their home, the Guru's gut actually. And, it's just it's in Sikhs to take that sort of action to try to at least stop them. I mean, but it's a really harrowing event. And I know people who live near that area. And like, I've talked to some people who've lost people from there. It's a really, tragic story. One thing that actually came out of it though was that there was no tracking data on anti-Sikh hate crimes before this incident. And then some of the family members of survivors, like took to the US government. And since then, actually, they started tracking specifically anti-Sikh hate crimes, because we were just thrown into anti-Muslim hate crimes before. And so now there's a specific data section for anti-Sikh hate crimes, and anti-Sikh hate crimes are like the 3rd highest in the country, in the US. And it's like, it's gone up in the last year or two as well. And so, yeah, there's been a lot for our community in the post 9/11 world. Actually, I'm sure you're familiar, the first recorded hate crime was 4 days after 9/11, and it was a man named Balbir Singh Sodhi. And the dude who did it thought he was Arab, Muslim, whatever. Just saw a man in a turban outside his gas station gardening, by the way. That's what he was doing when he was shot and killed. And so, yeah, it's been a lot for our community here in the US and globally. There have been Sikh hate crime, anti-Sikh hate crimes all across the world, but specifically in the West. I know in the UK it's happened too. So, yeah, but Oak Creek specifically was like the first one, like really, like major, I guess. I don't want to belittle or minimize any other, event or any other loss of life, but that was the first like really like reported on. And people, when you talk to people here in the US, at least most people have at least heard about it. They may not know like the names and everything like that, but they'll be like, if I say like, oh, that, Sikh temple shooting, they'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. That's usually, it's that it made that much news. I hate saying that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But it's crazy because like the coverage as well, like I don't know. To be honest, like I feel like that's probably the first time so many people have even heard about a Sikh. Like,
Yes.
like that's when a definition for people was created,
Yes.
because Sikhs died. That's why. And it just shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case at all. But what I am happy to say is that even today in the Sangat, there are those Sikhs who are willing to move forward, to try and sacrifice themselves, to try and save other people. And it's the same principles that Sikhi was born from. So I would like to hopefully in the future see a lot more of that coverage as well. So see Sikhs be well known for that kind of stuff. In India, at least, that's what they used to be well known for. Like if a Sikh got on a train, everyone on the train would feel safer. If a police officer got on the train, everyone would just feel the same way. But a Sikh, it stood for something, it meant something, and everyone knew that. But now we're almost losing that image, and I think a lot of it is from culture. A lot of it is from what does the media portray? What is the media showing people? And we have so many good Sikhs within our Sangat. We have so many strong people. We have so many amazing things that have been done, but so often it just gets swept under the rug and no one pays any attention to it. And we need, I don't know if we need Sikh media that needs to start showing this, or if I don't know how we go about this issue, but the media representation, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue.
Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru.